civilians that pass through our unit. So Colonel Sloat's in a unique position to kind of coach and mentor civilians, young people coming in the military, people leaving the military, moving over to the civilian world, and give them advice. And he's got a lot of good information for us on what employers are looking for and what you need to think about, your mindset ready for entering into the workforce in a place where maybe there's more applicants than there are jobs. So having said that, Colonel Sloat, would you let us please? Thank you.
Jeff.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Lenny Sloat. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about transitioning into the workforce. I'd ask everyone to go ahead and silence your cell phone. If you want to have sidebar conversations, go ahead and take them outside. I'm not here to bring you into the Army or tell you about the Army. I'm here to talk about you transitioning into the workforce. I'm a senior officer. I'm going to talk to you about three things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to talk to you about what you're facing entering the job market. And I'm going to give you a three-phase plan because I'm in the Army and that's what I do. I was born in Iowa, 1966. I'll be 50 years old this year. I'm the oldest of three children. My parents, my mother was a cosmetologist. My father worked in a factory. He eventually rose up with no education to be a plant manager and then to become a senior consultant, where he would travel to companies like Boeing, just large companies that he was traveling to. He also did some work for the government, and it was amazing to watch him progress through all these phases and learn all these things. And you have a lot of the tools, I hope, that he had to move up in the system he was in. Tell you a little bit about what I do. I'm the Chief of Operations at the 316th ESC. We have about 9,000 soldiers that go from West Virginia up to Maine, 4 brigades, 11 battalions, and about 75 companies of soldiers that we run. I write all the orders, I manage all their mobilizations, handle all of their training requirements, make sure that they're properly equipped. I personally have a team of about 45 people that I run day to day. I do numerous hiring actions for civilians and military personnel. And that's really what Professor Stakely was bringing to the table. That's the reason he asked me to come here and speak to you. Let's talk a little bit about what you're facing here. And I also ask it, if you have a question at any time, we can cut right into a discussion. And I'm happy to do that. I actually have a son who's 25, so he's pretty similar in age to you. You're looking at a very tight job market right now. Who thinks they're just going to like cruise out of here and get a job very easily? Anybody? Go ahead. What you got, man?
I think if I were to find enough people, it's easier than if I just sit around and do nothing.
Right. As far as getting the job, well, I want to kind of give you a plan today of how you can transition into that. How many people know the statistic on 2015 college graduates for employment? You guys done any research on that? Okay. As of May last year, it was 7.2% unemployed. So we have about 80 people in here, so about 4 of you, or probably 5 of you, aren't going to be able to find a job, is what you're looking at right now. And that doesn't include partial employment. So partial employment is, hey, I got a 20-hour-a-week gig, doing something. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for full-time employment. I want to talk to you about how you can transition into that. So some of the things you're going to have to deal with are, what are your own expectations of finding a job? Do you have a salary range? Do you have a location? Do you have a position in mind that you want to get? What's your clear mental picture, and how adaptable are you in that clear mental picture you have, and how ready are you to action that? So it's quite a bit to look at. Does anybody here have a clear picture of the job they intend to have when they graduate? So, what is in your head?
Real estate investment,
Okay.
property development.
property development? And you're going to school for that right now? Okay. And why do you have that picture of that's what you want to do? Do you have some experience in that field, or your family works in it? Okay, okay. Do you have the capital to get involved with that? Okay, great. What are your expectations of yourself? What are your family's expectations of you? You're going to have to deal with student loans. Who here doesn't have a student loan to deal with? Okay. A couple people don't have a student loan to deal with this. The rest of us have to deal with a student loan. So that's about 90% of you, 95% of you. You're going to have to find a job. You're going to have to market yourself into that position. And the only way that you're going to be able to really market yourself into that is to be prepared. The way it starts, somebody's going to have a stack of resumes. Your resume is going to have to stand out. And then you're going to have to interview. Usually you go through 2 to 3 interviews before they offer you a position. So they take it from maybe 80 applicants down to 15 for the first interview, and then they might have 4 or 5 for the second interview. It's quite a process to go through. And you have to be very prepared in that process. And then once you do actually get a job, you have to deliver on what you marketed yourself as. So that's another step. Or they'll be going through another stack of applications pretty soon. You're going to have to deal with the boss, and you're going to have to deal with a system that you might not agree with. So, in the adult world, when you have something that you don't agree with that's going on, and it's legal, moral, and ethical, and that's the way they do business, if you're part of that company, you have to decide that's how I'm going to continue. That's how I'm going to own that and be part of this team. If you look at it and go, oh, that's stupid, and you decide that you don't want to participate fully in the plan, or you want to build your own individual practices, you're not really on the team there, and you won't be on that team for very long. So you need to ask yourself some questions. Are you aware of the needs of an employer? Do you think about what the employer needs, or are you going into it kind of thinking about what you need? Are you aware of what the employer is bringing to the table? So you have your salary that you receive. Well, in addition to your salary, the employer has about 40% overhead on you when you factor in all the taxes and the risks that they take and other costs. So let's say you make $45,000 a year. They're really putting in $65,000 or so to have you there. How do you add value to the company? It's really about you bringing in more than you take away. And are you willing to accept that? A lot of folks look at it like, if I'm bringing in $100,000, I should get $100,000. Well, on what we just talked about, maybe you should get 60, but your employer has you there to make money too, so maybe you really get 50. And is that reasonable? You have to be willing to accept that. Your student loans, they're going to hit you right after college. How long is the grace period after you finish college to start paying on your student loans? Anybody know? 6 months. Okay. So you have 6 months, and what is that loan doing the whole time that you're in your 6-month grace period? Anybody know? Right, it's accruing interest. So the debt that you have coming out of college just grows and grows and grows the whole time you're looking for a job. So I'm not trying to paint an overly dismal picture. I just want you to be aware of what you're facing. And how many folks think they're just going to pay the minimum payment on your student loans? Is anybody just going to make the minimum payment? Okay, I bet about 80% of you are going to start out just making the minimum payment. Of myself and all my friends that I went to college with, that's what we did. And it strings out sometimes 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and the whole time you're paying 7.5%, 8%, 9% interest. So how are you going to find a job that suits your needs? The first thing you have to do is settle into what you want to do. There are 3 phases for entering the job market that I've identified. The first thing you need to do is make a timeline. How long is reasonable after you finish college to start your job? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? All right, we'll go ahead and make a timeline. Has anybody done this with you before? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and team up. I'm not going to give it to you. We're going to come up with it together. You graduate college. Is anybody here graduating in May? Okay. All right, May of 2016, you're going to graduate. Who's going to be graduating in May of 2016? All right, why don't you guys come on up? We'll do this together. I'm not trying to embarrass you or put you on the spot, but that's a fact, Jack. So May of 2016, when are you guys going to start sending out resumes? Hey, there you go. So graduation isn't where you start looking for a job. So just back that up. All right. So you guys, as a team, go ahead and come up with a timeline, and I'm going to keep talking. All right. So while they build that, take a few minutes and put it together. We'll just continue with the process here. So they're going to have, in their timeline, they're going to have options for themselves. They're going to have decision points. They should probably have a couple different ideas of where they want to end up. And you can build that for just one of you. So just pick the person who I'm in and you guys work together, okay? So you have to assess what your leadership, management, and communication skills are. Who can tell me the most important part of leadership? I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. When I don't agree with what my bosses or the system that I'm entering is, and I continue to follow it wholeheartedly, what do you think would be the most important part of leadership? Huh? Listening to the people underneath me. I'll give you a 3 out of 10 on that one. The most important part of good leadership is good followership. I think the only person in the United States that probably doesn't have a boss is President Obama, and the people are his boss. Everyone has a boss. If you are self-employed, do you have a boss? Who's your boss? Okay. I'll give you a 2 out of 10 on that one. Who's your boss if you're self-employed? Let's say you own a construction company. Shareholders would be along those lines. It's the people who pay for your services. The people who pay for your services are your boss when you are self-employed. If you don't do what the people that you're working for want you to do you continue to get paid? No, you don't continue to get paid. So you have to ask yourself, and we've touched on this, how can I add value? And you have to focus on that. And you have to understand, if you want to join an organization, you have to understand that organization. What they produce, how they produce it, what their markets are. You have to have all the information you need when you put that resume together. And you have to I tailor each resume that I do for the employer that I'm going to be giving it to. I understand that company. And outside of the Army, I've worked for several large corporations. You have to manage your expectations. We've already covered on that. And you have to really understand what you're bringing to that employer. You have to understand your strengths and your weaknesses, understand what your capabilities are. Does anyone know what self-actualized means? Anybody?
Could be wrong, but when you know your strengths and weaknesses.
It's when you see yourself the way the rest of the world sees you. So, have you ever met someone who thinks they're one thing and the rest of the world kind of thinks they're something else? Most of us, it's a process that we go through. As you age, you begin to see yourself based on feedback that the world gives you as the way you really are. So when you assess yourself, you have to be really realistic and really honest with yourself. You guys got something put together? Okay. Let's see what you got. And Professor Stakely, I know that you hire people in your other world.
Yes, sir.
And I hire people in my other world. In the Army, we do this thing called a murder board. What do you think that means? So I'll go to the general and I'll say, sir, I have a plan for how we're going to transport all of the stuff we need to transport. He'll go, did you murder board it yet, Lenny? And I'll say, no, sir, I didn't. So I'll go get another colonel and I'll say, hey, let's murder board this. And I'll have maybe 4 or 5 people sit on a panel and I'll put my plan up to them and they pick it apart. And we don't take it personally because you come out of it with a stronger plan. We think through a lot of options and different ways that we can do it to make it better. So Mr. Stakely and I, who I know as Sergeant Stakely, and Professor Stakely, will go ahead and murder board this a little bit for you, okay? So don't take it personal. No hurt feelings, okay? All right. Just remember, we all love you. All right. So talk me through your timeline. Can you guys see over there? You guys sure you can see? Okay, so what does this say? You can't see it. Come on, man. Huh? Okay, go ahead. I know. So if you guys are over there, can you move over here a little bit? Can you read it? Okay. All right, so walk us through your plan.
I would say around January, we probably have like an idea. Start looking around for maybe some companies that you want
Okay.
to apply for. Get to know them. Like start getting your resume. You should have your resume together by then.
Okay.
Send it out. Just apply that way.
Okay.
Probably want to have some interview practice too, because that helps a lot too.
Okay.
And I would say also during the time between.
Well, let's back it up a little bit. So, and just to put this in context for you, this line, the solid line here, represents perfect job seeking skills and job attainment. So we're maybe right here right now. And this is against time. So every time you loop around it, the bigger loops mean less perfect, but the more you do it, the better you get. And maybe you get a job when you're around here. And we'll say that's in June. And this is February. What's the date, 22nd? Huh? 22nd? Okay. So you guys kind of kick it around in your head a little bit. We're here. We're not close to the skill set that we need to get the job, right? Does anybody feel like we're there to get the job right now? Except you. You guys seems like you have a good plan. But we want to get to this place where when we try, we're in a place where we're going to get a job. So what we'll do, understanding this, and this is called an iterative methodology. Who here plays sports? What sport do you play? Football? Okay. So the more you practice, what happens?
You better.
You get better. So he started out maybe when he came to Robert Morris here. When he's a junior, maybe he's here. And then when he's a senior, he's really, really good. He's done a lot of iterations of whatever position it is he plays. And he understands what the team's trying to do. So we're going to go ahead and murder board your plan. And we're going to add some details in. Does anyone not understand this? Okay, so explain to me what this means in the red sweater. Huh? You have a red sweater on? You have a red sweater on? Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Could you explain it to me in the blue hat?
So the horizontal straight line translates represents time, and then
Time and what else?
attainment,
And perfect job hunting.
and then the spiral loops are like how well your skill set for job seeking is.
Right.
So like the tighter the loops, the more perfect your.
And every loop is when you try. Every time you try, it's called iterative. You do it in iterations. You try to get a job, you try to put together a plan. The more you do it, the better you get. That was a very good explanation. I'm sorry if I put you on the spot. I wasn't trying to. So we're going to go ahead and murder board your plan now. And by the way, if you come in without a strong plan, you think you're going to get a job? People really aren't interested in that. Especially in a very competitive market. So, what's the first thing that you need to do? A resume for what? Okay, a job doing what? Okay, so what are you interested in? Okay, so you want to make a mental picture of the job that you want. So what is that? You're our guy, right? Okay, who is this for? All of us? You guys are one person? All right. Okay, so you have to decide on what you want to do. Now, what are the factors in that? Okay, skills. So, education. What else? You can open up for the group too. So you're doing this self-assessment. You're figuring out, what do I want to do? You looking at your skills, your education. What else are you looking at? Go ahead.
What you like.
Okay, what you like or your interests. What are other factors in this?
Size of the job market.
The what?
The size of the job market.
Like the amount of opportunity there is. Okay. What else? What other factors do you have?
Your wage,
Wage, pay. Does anybody here want to go to North Dakota? No? Okay. So is location a factor? All right. So before you build a resume, you got to kind of think of all these things. So this is resume. So you'll have your degree. You kind of know what you want to do. What else should you do before you do your resume? I hit on it earlier. Anybody?
Self-actualization.
Okay, self-assessment, very good. So when you're getting ready to do your resume and you do your self-assessment, who thinks they should like really build themselves up into something they're not in their resume? Almost everyone does it when they first do it because they want to get into that job position and I'll just deal with it when I get there. When you build this resume, you're telling somebody you can accomplish something or you can do something or you are something. I'm going to share a little secret with you. Under promise and over deliver. So if I think I can get something on Tuesday and maybe Monday to my boss or get something done in the context of my work or deliver a product, what day do you think I tell him? Huh? I tell him Wednesday or Thursday or maybe even Friday, and then I get to work, and if something happens or something comes up, we're still on time. But if I'm like, hey sir, Tuesday I'll have it. One of my guys gets sick, I get sick, my kid gets sick, something happens where a truck breaks down, anything can happen. So under promise and over deliver, and they'll appreciate your honesty in building your resume. Put the energy into making as high of a quality as a resume as you can. We'll get to the interview part here. So, did you think about all these things going into the resume that you're going to build? Did you? Okay. Okay. So all those things go into building a resume. Did I miss anything here? Can anyone think of anything that I missed? So what we're doing right now is mentally, we're all getting iterations on this process. And the more you loop it around, and the better organized you are, and the clearer vision you have of someone calling you and saying, hey, do you want a job, and you working in that job, the more likely you are to make it happen. So that's your resume. So you got that. What's wrong with this timeline? It's February. Okay? So all right. So you've done all this, and you're at the point where you want to apply for jobs. Would you add anything to this, Professor Stakely?
I've always thought about differentiation. If there's a way you can differentiate yourself from other people, just give yourself a competitive advantage. Try to find something that's unique to you, put on it, get your attention.
Okay. So find ways you stand out.
Absolutely.
So they're going to look at this resume, and they're going to see holes in you are if you are accurately represent yourself. And it's very important to them to understand that you understand the holes that you have in your skill sets, in your personality, in your capabilities, and that you're working on it. They don't expect you to be perfect coming out of college, but they do expect you to understand what you are and who you are and how you're able to contribute to the company and the things that you need to work on to best contribute to the company. Would you add anything else, Professor Stakely?
I think that's good.
Would anybody else add anything to this? I'm sure I missed something. All right, so you have a resume. You've submitted 100 of them by April, May. Okay. Does anyone think this is a realistic timeline at this point? Okay, so let's before we move on, let's make this a more realistic timeline. How long is it going to take you to do this to good fidelity? Huh? Okay, so by March, you've got a resume, and based on your resume is going to change based on who you're submitting it to or what position. So we'll say March, you're going to have a good resume. All right, you can start doing interview rehearsals now. While you're preparing to send out your resumes, who here has done job interviews before? Okay, can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Well, it was for McDonald's, and basically just sat down and asked me a bunch of questions and
Okay.
how I would kind of do everything.
Okay, all right. Back in the back there, you had said you'd done what was a job for?
Just like for a server at a restaurant.
Okay,
Yeah, just like minimum wage type job.
okay. Did they, and I'll ask this to both of you, what kind of questions did they ask you? You said they asked questions about how it benefited you?
Like how it benefited the company, I guess, how many hours we would work a week, and how available it would be.
Okay. So they pretty much made the decision to hire you at that point. You were just negotiating with them. What was your experience?
They just asked like what I could do for the company, why I chose their company and stuff like that.
Okay. And they pretty much decided to hire you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you my experience. As a junior military officer, I decided to get out of the Army, regular Army, and go into the reserves. And I went with a junior officer employment agency. And they did the same process with me, helping me do my resume. And then we went into this, and it was an exceptionally brutal period of interviewing. And, you really have to be prepared for those interviews, whether it's an in-person interview or a phone interview. You have to be prepared for the questions they're going to ask you. You have to be yourself. You have to be able to make a read on that person of what they're looking for. Who thinks you should have the same MO with everyone that you interact with? You should just be that consistent you all the time. As you get older, you're going to see, as you advance, you have to adapt to the people that you deal with. It's not being manipulative, it's just being effective. It's the most effective way to deal with other people. So if you interview and rehearse enough, you'll start to develop that skill set. So how do you do that? You have your parents interview, you have your friends interview you, you ask your professors to interview you. Don't just interview yourself and say, I got this. Okay? It doesn't work. I promise you, you don't have that. So, while you're developing your resume, you're doing interview practice, how long are you going to do that? Just in February? Okay, so we're going to do this to June. Yeah, you're not going to be getting interviews in April at this point. You're talking about in 90 days. You think you're going to have interviews in 90 days? Probably not. Oh, and by the way, everybody else is applying for these same jobs too, right now. So, February to June, you're doing practice interviews. I'd I'd say you're probably gonna see your first interview May, June. Does anyone disagree with that? Go ahead.
I think there are certain situations where not only is placement available, but also job fairs where they do on-the-spot interviews to narrow the field down significantly faster,
Okay.
3 or 4 months.
Okay, and do you think this group is prepared to do that right now?
I think if they have prepared the resume and, I guess you could say, studied well so that they're prepared. And at this point, if they start sending interviews out now or showing the job fairs, they might be prepared to sit down somebody, but that also depends on the field of the job,
Mm-hmm.
other variables. But if you're trying to prepare for an interview specifically to a job that you're not prepared to do now, then yeah, the timelines might be realistic.
And I would say to you, in the context of under-promise and over-deliver, you should be ready by May. But that's really, really prepared. Because you really have to break all these things down before you do that and really understand it. Are you guys gonna take the first job that someone offers you or comes along, or? Okay. So you gotta understand what you fit into, and then you have to get to how you're gonna fit into it. And really, this timeline is an important piece of that. So we'll say late April, May, ready to do interviews. You're gonna graduate in, I don't know, what do you think, Professor Stakely? How long are they gonna take to get a job after college?
It could be several months, it could be longer, it depends. There may be a chance you go for some of your field, it's just not there, you have to take something else. So there's a lot of variability.
So in here, I had talked about decision points earlier. You have to make a decision, especially on location, wage, salary. When are you gonna open up? If you say, you know what, I only wanna work in Moon Township, and I only am gonna work if I make $80K a year. At what point in this timeline do you say, okay, I'm open to other possibilities? Because if you don't say, well, I'm not gonna open up to other possibilities until October, right? You've wasted all this time limiting yourself. So look at what you're here in your self-assessment and location. I'm sorry, in your location and your salary. So you got to look at your widest area that you'll work in, and you have to look at what the lowest salary range you're going to have. I'm not saying, don't shoot for the stars, but I promise you, the student loan just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. How many of you have kids? Okay. How many of you are married? Okay. When you get out of college, how many of you plan to get married in the next year? There you go. When you start getting children and a spouse, all your responsibilities really accumulate, and you have to be willing to support them. And I've been through that myself. It's very, very difficult. So you have to make a decision on where you're sending these resumes to. Are you going to stay in your very narrow scope of location and salary, or are you going to open it up right away? Where there are 7.2% of you who are going to be unemployed.
Well, I think there's more other scope that you consider next price.
Okay.
Because there are some very high salary positions that are very high risk.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Generally, then change your location.
Right. So let's say you move to Cleveland, and you don't last but a month in the job, right?
Or you could get out far, getting your reps up.
Which would be awesome. All right, so does this give you a better picture? So kind of, why don't you walk me through your plan here? Yeah, just walk us through. And just so everyone knows, how many times do you have to hear something before it sinks in? 6 times. So if it seems like he's old and repeating himself, I'm doing it deliberately so this stuff sinks in. Go ahead.
To the original plan that we.
Just talk to me about any modifications you've made to your plan based on this.
Okay. Yeah.
Loud and proud.
The resume part, we adjusted so we could start applying for jobs. We can't apply for jobs without an accurate resume. The practice interviews.
Well, you have to have a clear picture of what you want. Location, salary range, what your, in the Army we call it your duties. What your duty description is, what your job description is. So you got a clear picture of that. You did your resumes, and then what are you doing?
Once we do the resumes, we send them out in the meantime for practice no practice interviews to prepare for actual interviews. And we get a few actual interviews as late May, and anywhere between May and we have October. Anywhere after May is where a job comes around.
So-
It doesn't even have to be in here because it just.
So how many practice interviews do you think you're going to do before you have an actual interview?
I would guess it's in 5 or 6.
Okay. I would look at doing at least 25 practice interviews and ask the person to be difficult that's giving you the practice interview. Because you never know what's going to get thrown at you. Sometimes they'll just talk about random things in the interview, but they're actually gauging your responses. They're, in the psychology of it, they're seeing how open-minded you are, how resistant you are to change. Change is a huge part of the world that we live in, and your ability to accept change could be a deciding factor in whether they hire you for a position or not. And get different people to give it to you, particularly people who are engaged in business, who hire people. Work with them, and you can ask Professor Stakely to contact me, and I'll be happy to give any of you a practice interview. If you want to take the time to do it, I'll take the time to do it. Okay? So you're doing your rehearse interviews. Talk to me about your actual interviews.
Like I said, the actual interviews could range from any amount of questions. So even with like the 25 practice interviews, you still go to an interview with not having a
Right.
clear understanding which direction it's
Right.
going.
So you do all this preparation for the interview. What are some of the things you should factor in when you're going into that, as far as how you present yourself? Go ahead. Yeah, go.
I guess like your posture or something like that. How you
Okay.
carry yourself.
That's yes. How you carry yourself is very important.
I guess you gotta be confident with your answers.
Okay, confident with your answers. That's good. What else?
I'd say knowing what the interviewer is looking for, trying to apply what your experiences are, and trying to fit into that job.
That's good. Yep. Anything else? So the second you walk in there, what are they going to do? They're going to take your measure. Are you dressed appropriately? Do you look confident? Are you the image that they want for their company? All of those things factor into it. Because when you go out into the world, unless you're on the phone all the time, how you present yourself in that moment, they're going to say, is that who I want to represent me? who I want to represent my company. It's a big thing. So they gauge you right away. What other information should you have when you go into that interview?
Read the company's financial reports.
Okay, read their financial reports. What else? Current events about the industry and the business, yeah?
Know who you're interviewing with in the company?
Okay. You should have a good you apply for a position, you should have a good understanding of what's involved with that position. And if you go through it enough, you can see yourself in it and understand how you'll perform and ask them questions about that position. It's very important that you're interested in the duties. They're going to pay you, in some cases, a significant amount of money to do. So be prepared for that. So we'll just kind of walk this through one more time. So you're going into the interview, and where are you at? Okay, you're at the interview. Where are you at mentally? Confident, well-dressed, positive. What else? You know who you are, and you hope that they perceive you the same way that you perceive yourself. What else did we talk about? You should have all the information about the position that you're applying for, about the company. Those are things that you have to be prepared to answer. And what I do is I visualize. So I'm visualizing myself doing the duties, the questions that I might have, the questions I'm going to ask the interviewer. Because if you show interest in the position that you're going to take, other than how much do I get paid and what are my work hours, you're probably not too likely to get that job. But if you are actively interested in what those duties entails, it makes a big difference. Who here thinks they're going to go just work for a paycheck? Anybody? Is anybody here going to work for a paycheck? Let me tell you, when you get actively engaged in being employed, it's a significant portion of your life. Why would you do something that's a significant portion of your life without being completely into it? Right? So let's say you're spending 30% of your time doing your job. I've seen a lot of people who that 30% of their time isn't very enjoyable for them. Find something that's fulfilling for you. And when you go through this process, identify things that you think are going to be fulfilling. And you'll be a lot more productive in it. So now we're at the interviews. So walk me through your mindset going into an interview. Go ahead.
Well-prepared, confident, well-dressed.
Well-dressed and groomed. Okay. What else are you going to know?
Know a lot about the company,
Okay.
know what you want to say.
And know about the position that you're applying for.
Yeah, you go prepared with what the company wants in the job.
Okay. And have questions about that job. Okay. All right. So you got some interviews. Say you didn't get hired. Now we'll fast forward here to July. And we'll just use statistics. 7.2% of you aren't going to have a job. And you're only talking 2 months after college. No callbacks after first interview. Well, I did my resume in February, and I got a couple interviews off of it. But nobody's calling me back. How are you going to take that?
You might want to do some more practice interviews and see like what might have went wrong in the interviews you did attend.
Okay, could you speak up? I really can't hear you. I'm like trying to,
You should do some more practice interviews and see what might have went wrong during your actual interviews.
okay?
That might have been why you didn't get the job.
Okay. So we got, how much time do we have?
So we're just going for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Transition to some questions.
Yeah, I will. So I'll just tell you, if you're at July and you don't have a job yet, and you're not getting called either to interviews or second interviews, you have to do something different. You're not doing something right. You can call the person that you interviewed with. They may or may not answer you, but at least ask the question, hey, I know you interviewed me. Is there something that I'm missing? I'm new at this. I'm trying to find my place. And I just want to know, what should I do different? And you guys can go ahead and sit down. Thanks a lot. Hey, let's give them a hand. The last piece that I'm going to touch on with you on this is the importance of humility. Humility is probably the most important human condition that there is. From humility comes confidence. Humility is the way that, in a spiritual sense, we open ourselves up to God. And in the interpersonal sense, it's the way that we open up to each other. You cannot open up to an arrogant person. It's impossible. When you're a humble person, people can open up to you, and you can open up to other people, and you find a place to start that relationship. So confidence is not arrogance. Humility is how are you going to serve that company and make them money. And the money that they give you is an absolute benefit of it. And the more money you give them, guess what happens? The more money they give you. But you have to do it from a place of humility. That's where the real win comes from. That covers the presentation I have for you today, and I'm willing to take any questions that you have. Bueller?
There are all
I
good
just like
questions.
saying
There's no such thing as a bad question. Now's your opportunity.
What is your name again?
Lenny Sloat, Lieutenant Colonel Lenny Sloat. All right, I got to ask my name. That's awesome.
Other questions?
Any other questions? I wanted to hit on this, how important it is for you to have a plan going into this. And I know it's not the most fun subject to discuss, but it's going to be super important to you. And there's a whole group of people in the world now that sit in there that have college degrees. They sit in their parents' basement and play Xbox. And they're not getting out there in the world because they didn't go through this process, or they just said, you know what, I'm not doing that. You have to really be prepared for this, and it's a very, very competitive job market out there. So, does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
What was your transition
What do you mean?
from school to first?
Well, I went when I was older. I actually started out in the Marine Corps and had a very difficult time, and then I went through ROTC. I worked the whole time I was in college. Before I went to college, I worked in a factory making countertops and putting grain in bags and doing all of that stuff. My transition came when I went to college, and then I went in the active Army for 5 years, and I got out, and then I went and worked for Tyco Corporation. And that was when I really, the light hit, hey, you have to really contribute to your company, and you have to bring in a lot more than you're taking out, if you're involved in corporate America. So that was when the light switched for me. And then about 10 years ago, I went through this thing where I was able to retire from the Army, like really retire and collect a paycheck. And I quit being afraid of failing, and I was willing to, like we talked about here, assume risk, but really understand risk. Like, okay, there's about a 40% chance that this won't work out. Let my boss know, and then off we go. And if he's willing to assume it, I'm willing to assume it. Just don't be afraid to try something new, propose a new process, change the way you do things, find inefficiencies. That was my breakthrough. them, just kind of do small talk, ask them about their family, talk about if they've moved, talk about different work situations, you know, bring up some situations, ask them how they'd react. Here's one. You feel like your boss is picking on you. You are not overly enthused about it. You're kind of getting this thing where you don't want to come to work, and your boss is building up your workload. How are you going to react to that? To where it's past what you're capable of doing. How are you going to deal with that? So I'll see how they respond. If they say, you know what, I would go honestly lay it out to my boss and say, hey, this is where I'm at in this. What do you think? Do you think this is reasonable? Can I have some additional resources to accomplish these tasks? Can you give me some advice on process? You know, try to find ways for the company to be successful versus, well, I just go to HR. Well, you know, now you have a boss that instead of taking that opportunity to build something stronger that you can move forward to the benefit of the company, you know, now you have this, we're writing down everything each other says and hoping we can get the other one fired. Who wants to do that? How's that productive for the company? You know what I mean? And that stuff happens all the time. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, also, you said that you talk about the family. How do you get around the discrimination questions, like, oh, are you married or stuff like that?
How many
Supposedly
kids do you
can't ask
have?
that. Yeah, supposedly you can't ask that in an interview. Is
I-
that true? Do you ask that?
I ask it, how many kids do you have? Are you married? Just normal things. It's not I don't think it's discriminatory. I've never had anybody say anything about it.
I used to ask that question all the time. Recently, I was told
Okay. Told by your HR?
professors.
Okay. Well, those are questions that I ask. I'll ask about their parents, where they're from, those types of things. I'm not asking personal religion questions or anything like that. Does that answer your question? Anybody else have any questions? I think we're out of time. Hey, thank you all very much.
Let's round of applause for Colonel Sloat. Yeah, one more thing. I'm gonna ask Colonel Sloat to pull 2 of these tickets out here.
Don't I get a ticket to put in there?
No, sir. It's these
Okay.
nice dudes.
All right. 097.
There we go.
There
Come
you
on
go.
up, please. And one more, sir.
078.